I'm probably an hour from a hospital if something happens out here, maybe 50 miles. So the importance of having a pretty comprehensive first aid kit is important. I live here across the way. The gal has a rescue, a horse rescue, and she's saved, many. But on the property here, there's 4 of them that got saved from slaughter. It's just a messy situation. I won't go into that any more than that without talking to her first and whatever. But we have 7 horses out here, and that's if you own horses, If you don't, then here's kind of the rundown. They need to be fed at least 3 or 4 times a day. They burn through the hay like crazy. They just straight in and straight out. You have to take care of the mess. You have to take care of the feeding. It takes a special person to be able to manage horses. Not to mention the safety factor. Horses are dangerous. They're wonderful, and they're beautiful and majestic and all the things you expect a horse to be. And especially if you've owned horses for most of your life, and there's just nothing like it. It's just a big dog, but their mentality is a little different. Sometimes they pay attention, like when it's feeding time, and sometimes they don't, like when it's feeding time. I got clocked by one of the horses 2 days ago. We had already fed them, and I was going out there to let them out of their stalls. And 2 of the horses were like face to face in this area, in the barn where the stalls are. And one of them spun around to bite another horse. That's what they do. They play, but they play rough. And I was just happened to be in between these 2 horses, and he spun his head around so fast, knocked me out. Just knocked me out cold. Last thing I remember was his face coming at my eyeball and his mouth opening up. And the next thing I remember, I'm on the ground, shaking my head, checking it, make sure it's all there, and just, processing what had just happened. It was so fast and so powerful, and I got lucky. I just got knocked out. This is one of the teeth hit up on my eyebrow was where his jawbone smacked me and knocked me out. It was like, I can't even tell you how fast it happened and how violent it was. Usually when I get knocked down, whether the dogs are coming up from behind me or whatever, and there's a rolling tackle and you don't see it coming and you're in the snow, you fall down. But I've always managed to be able to get my hands out and, save myself. This one knocked me out cold and landed on this shoulder, and I think the clavicle jammed up against my neck bone, whatever's connected on the other side of it. And I have to drink coffee with my right hand for a while until it heals up. I know it's bruised. Excuse me. Anyway, point is, like I say, all of the other things involved. We're on the downhill slope, and there's just, the mud is probably 5-6 inches deep, and 5 and 6 inch deep mud with snowshoes or galoshes or whatever. You have to wear something, muck boots. Otherwise they get sucked right off if you're not paying attention. You step down, you can't get up, that one's stuck. You step down, you can't get up, that one's stuck. Now if the horses are coming at you for some reason, any reason, you're fucked. You can't get out of the way. It's a dangerous thing, and like I said, the woman who owns the horses is she's brave. I would say she got balls, but not sure. Haven't been there in a while. But anyways, the idea of having some sort of way to manage triage or first aid out here is probably a little more important than it would be if you could walk down the block and there's a little clinic or something. one of those 24-hour jobbies. Think about the things that can happen out here or out anywhere for that matter. You know, if you're not on the grid or, you know, or you're outside town a little bit. Like I said, I got lucky. I just got knocked out, bruised a couple bones, and, you know, I'm going to have a nice one of those scars like that one guy, that actor that's got that little on his, yeah. Anyway, if you break an arm or you're cut badly, you can die of shock before you get treatment. And knowing how to use some first aid things, how to use gauze, how to use, you know, a splint. One of these days I'm going to have to open my first aid bag. There's these things called, they're orange, they're aluminum, and they've got padding on it, and you can unroll them and bend them into any shape you want to correct. If you broke your arm or you break your leg or your wrist, it can happen. It can happen just by walking in the snow and falling down. Snap. The older you get, the slower you get. I'd like to think that's not true, but I know better. I've fallen. I've had the dogs come up behind me in a rolling thing that they do. They get all tangled up and shit. They're moving at, you know, at 30 miles an hour, and they hit me from behind. Don't turn your back on a dog on ice when they're running after you or coming up from behind you. It's a tackle, and it hurts. It hurts on ice. That's not a soft landing. Mud is a pretty soft landing, but not ice. And so if, you know, something gets cracked or whatever and you need to get in for some help, at least be able to stabilize it. That's going to give you some comfort. You know, there's the splints, the slings, different things. That's just on bones. You never really can tell. If you damage your neck, you're kind of screwed. You got to call in air support because you don't want to be moving around too much. That could be a problem. But being cut, you know, I mean, I can't tell you how many things I've moved around, dug out, things we found in the pasture when we bought the place, or when she bought the place, that were buried, that were dangerous to the horses. I don't know what the heck they were thinking. There's pieces of frickin' metal out there that didn't even turn up till the horses stomped, you know, and moved the dirt around. But you go to pick one of these up and you're not paying attention, or if it's a piece of glass and you get cut, man, two things: infection, and probably the biggest, worst, of course, is bleeding, not being able to stop it. I would say encourage anyone who's not familiar with stopping the bleed to look. Ironically, most of what I learned was on YouTube, right? And good stuff. Learning how to stop a bleed is huge because you only got so much of it. And the only way you can make more is to stop the hemorrhage, you know, stop the bleed. And sometimes that means packing a wound directly and then padding over it and then putting pressure and applying pressure. If that works, terrific. If it doesn't stop and it gets, you know, to the next step, then you're into tourniquet territory. And that presents a lot of problems in itself. And if you don't do it properly, you could die. If you do it properly, you might lose a limb. If you don't do it at all, you could die. Right? So super important. Learn what a tourniquet is, how to use it, when not to use it. Just as important. That'll stop, you know, most of the major bleeding, other than, of course, the pressure. Pressure is huge. A lot of times, I mean, you think about how marvelous the body is. Imagine all the injuries you've got your whole life if you were never able to heal. You'd be one fuckered up piece of hamburger. Just, you know, what a mess. The marvel is that we can heal. It takes a little time, but you got to stop the bleeding. You got to give yourself a chance. Have a first aid pack to address, you know, bones, fractures, compound fractures, and worse, and then get some treatment if you're able, and stop the bleed. There's a Celox, which is a powder you can put into an open wound, and it almost instantly stops bleeding. Huge, huge to have one or two of those. You might never need it. There's problems with it, but it can save your life. You know, I tried to think of 3 or 4 other times that I needed some first aid, and I happened to have it because I thought ahead and I watched a lot of videos, and it's like, you know, if nobody else, especially when I was here for the first year, there was no one else around for miles. And, you know, it's, I can't even imagine what it would be like to come across me laying on the ground, you know, for a couple of weeks, and then having somebody find me. That would just be awful. Especially if you can get to, you know, treatment supplies of your own, just to be able to get the phone, get to the treatment. I don't know how much more I can say about that. I just think it's super important, not just for people who live out yonder in the woods, excuse me, but for those who have children too, that, you know, you want to be able to do everything you can. Get the stuff, learn how to use it. Enough said. One of the things about cuts or abrasions or wounds sometimes is that they can get infected. Infection is one of those kind of things you really don't want to mess with because it's difficult to control. And just imagine for a moment if you couldn't afford to get to the doctor, or you're snowed in and couldn't get out, or the ambulance couldn't get in. A couple days go by, you know, you got a wound that's, you know, starting to show signs of being infected. You're going to want to be able to treat those with something. There's a lot of prepper channels out there that talk about colloidal silver. It's one of those things that I believe is a great addition to your supplies. Colloidal silver is one of those kind of things that some people love it. Some people try to tell you it's going to turn you purple. There's a whole story behind that guy that turned purple. If you look up colloidal silver, you'll see it. The raspberry dude, or the blueberry guy. Excuse me. He added an accelerant to the process, and he spent a lot of time in the sun, and he way overdid his intake. Silver is one of those things that most naturally the body has no problem with. It doesn't affect the bad flora in your gut. It doesn't do a lot of things that many of these organizations are saying, it's terrible, watch out, it's killer. I mean, think about it. The Romans were putting this silver coins in their water to keep it from going stagnant, or to keep it from developing bacterias or other things that were not good for people. You know, for their warriors and the marches, they would carry silver coins in their water barrels. We, even in the 1800s, were putting silver coins in our milk containers to keep them fresher longer, which is exactly how it happened that we started learning about this. People were born in the medieval times with a silver spoon in their mouth. They actually got small doses of silver. When you shed silver, it denies the ability of some bacteria to multiply. It's a positive ion, negative ion thing. You can look it up. I really don't want to bother trying to explain it to you because there's so much information out there that's way better than what I could manage. But I do have a kit. I do have, I make my own. And I've been making my own silver, colloidal silver, for years. Takes 2 silver coins, preferably 4 nines. Takes a little bit of wire and a couple clips and a jar and water. That's it. The whole process is as follows, basically. You take a 18 volt, 12 volt battery, like one of the Makita or a Roy Obi or whatever, the 18 volts are fine. You clip one of these terminals on each of the leads, and you connect the other end to two silver coins or one coin split in half. Funny, I always carry one in my wallet. I have see the outline there? That's a silver coin in there, 4 nines. And basically, that's medicine. In about 5 or 6 hours, you can have colloidal silver that is potent enough to kill bacteria. I know I could probably explain that a little bit more, but there's a lot of channels, like I say. The idea is that you electrocute the two terminals. The silver is close together. The ions bounce off each other, and one of the sides sheds ionic silver, basically, into the water. The water has to be pure. It can't be diluted because diluted water has no sediment, and the silver ions need to be attracted to certain particles in the water, which means purified water, things like that, but not distilled. Distilled goes in your battery in your car, not in colloidal silver. And there's reasons for that too, which of course I'm sure you can find if you look it up. Colloidal silver. Yep, that's a good one. First of all, if you're one of these episodes later on, I'm going to talk about bartering. Bartering is super good idea. In fact, I've got the lady down the way, further on down the way. She has chickens, and every once in a while, if we run out of eggs and we need eggs, she's got eggs. But she also has this talent for making, Kahlua and other distilled spirits, and among other things. So she told me she was interested in getting some colloidal silver from me in exchange for something that she has. So we're going to have to talk about that. It's probably going to be the Kahlua or the eggs, either one. But yeah, there's something to be said. And there's, like I say, you'll find all kinds of bad information about colloidal silver. But you'll also find some intriguing information. I mean, every hospital on the planet who has a burn unit, which is just about all of them, including the space station and NASA, have bandages for burns that contain colloidal silver because it actually helps promote healing and reduce infections. Great thing to have out here in the middle of nowhere. Not that I'm in the middle of nowhere, but I mean, follow me? Make some. Try to make some. Buy some. Just make sure it's not if it's really clear, you probably aren't getting a very strong fluid. If it's kind of like amber, you've got a lot of parts per million of silver shed in there, and the bodies love it. There's nothing, the human body, is nothing in the human body that's adverse to silver. It's one of the purest forms. It goes, like I said, I'm not going to try to sell this stuff or promote it. I'm just saying I make it. I've used it on wounds. I used it on my dogs. I used it on my TKO from Dorado, my little friend out there who's very fast, and just garnered a little bit more respect for me in the distance department. Yeah, I mean, you think about other things too, like earaches, sinus congestions, things like that. There's a plant that grows all over the place out here called mullein, mullein, mullein. Marvelous plant. This thing produces a stalk, and at some point in the spring, late spring, early summer, it puts out dozens and dozens and dozens of little yellow flowers. If you pick those flowers and put them in olive oil and let them steep for about 6 or 7 weeks, this is an ancient concoction that different civilizations have used in the ear. They would pour this olive oil in the ear, infused with these flowers from the mullein. I'm just going to call it mullein. Soft, broad leaves in a flowerette. They grow stalk, yellow flowers. Okay, so that's the ear part. If you take the leaves and smoke them after they're dried, you can actually, you don't have to smoke them. I'll explain that in a second. But if you smoke them, it's a direct uh, inlet to the bronchial, tube and columns. It's soothing, and it actually helps expel mucus and helps you breathe easier. Interesting. Mucinex, which is sold as a over the counter, for phlegm and all that jazz, comes from the mullein plant. That's where Mucinex comes from. It works. I can tell you it works because I've smoked it. It works. It takes about 10 minutes and you can feel a relief almost instantly, but it takes about 10 minutes to fully, and you can start expectating. Is that it? Expectating? Getting rid of some of that stuff you don't want. You can also make it into a tea. I know people have put it into decoctions with alcohol and, extracted some of the medicine that way. There's so many. I mean, between mushrooms and all these other things, all these other plants. This is how we came to know medicine, basically, from the beginning. Was we would probably watch animals and what happened to them, and people would try whatever they could because that's all they could find. And over the years, these things just kind of, you think about the shaman and Native Americans and the Chinese and all of these ancient cultures through time that have used plants and substances, not to mention their barter value. Oh, man. Let's see. Yeah, I'm going to do a whole episode on barter one of these days soon because that kind of thing has been on my mind because of, some of the global tensions and knowing what can happen. We just had some things going on with Israel. We just had some things this morning with Pakistan and Afghanistan. And so, and we look at our country and it's very divided. That was clear at the State of Union address. It's very divided. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to wrap that because this is probably getting on to about 23 minutes. So I have some other ones following up. And be careful around horses. Get a first aid kit. Know how to use it. And hopefully you have someone else around that can help out because sometimes if you get hurt and you're by yourself, that's kind of a drag. Anyways.